Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains and GoLand. I'm Paul Everett, JetBrains Developer Advocate, and I'll be your host. The topic for today's webinar is Essential Tips and Tricks for GoLand. Today, I am back with the GoLand team. Welcome, Florin. We had a lot of fun together on the webinar last time, a couple of weeks ago. Got some new ideas planned this time. Can you give yourself a little introduction?
Hey everyone, thanks Paul for the introduction. My name is Florin, I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains, and I focus on Go and all Go-related technologies, which includes our IDE, GoLand.
You're a developer advocate, I'm a developer advocate. One of the things we do all the time, it feels like 300% of our capacity goes into this. We work on tips. So tips for GoLand, how to use it productively, how to get started, how to get more out of it. There's a lot to cover, right? I mean, today, the tips that you're showing, are you aiming it at new users, power users?
Oh, I think it's going to be a combination of both, because it's really hard to say I'm aiming towards new users when there may be power users which may not be aware of some of these, and I hope at least one of these will be new for everyone watching.
And
It's
yeah, something I was just thinking about on that, and I wonder about your thinking on it. With the people that are, I'm looking over here at the people that are going to be asking us some questions today. Sometimes they are a power user, but on some other topic, they like put on a different hat and they're a new user, right?
Exactly. And for example, I will show you about, I don't know, let's say 25, 26 tips, plus maybe any questions from the audience. We'll get to that. But think about it this way. The repository I'm using to show you today has more than 60 tips already, and we have a lot more to add to it. And I think there are hundreds and thousands of features that we can easily share with others.
Is it safe to say that today is Essential Tips and Tricks Part 1?
Honestly, most likely, yes. It's gonna be
Part 1 of
probably the
infinity?
first one. Exactly.
All right,
So,
and I believe you want people to engage with us, to talk with us, but also kind of a little trick here. You want them to suggest some tip that they think is cool, and we will try, we meaning you, will try to do it live heroically without any problem, right?
well, that's the exactly the spirit of it. We will try, but
We
this
will
being
try.
a live presentation, not recorded, things may always break down. Hopefully, they won't. But yeah, I would really love to hear from you, our users. What do you find cool about our IDE? What do you think it's worth sharing with others? Or, any little nugget that you may have found lately and you're like, oh, I'm so excited I know this one because it's really cool to use and it's something I want to share with all the people.
We promise to try, we don't promise to succeed. Okay, great. We have a lot to cover. Onward. We'd like to make this webinar as conversational and live as possible. So should you have any questions or problems during the webinar, please feel free to ask them at any time during the presentation using the chat in YouTube. If you see my eyes look away from you over to there, it's because I'm looking at the comments, writing some things down, bringing them up for Florin. We'll have a few pauses during the webinar where Florin will answer your questions. And in this case, this webinar, we'll also try to talk about some of the ideas you have. Also, the GoLand team will be answering questions as well right there in the YouTube chat. I'll try and answer some things if I can. Please don't wait until the end of the talk. Ask your questions as soon as you have them. Usually the most common question is this webinar being recorded? We are currently recording, and the recording will be available in this YouTube channel basically immediately. Why am I laughing? Because I've done, I believe, 7 trillion webinars, and the first question is always, is this thing being recorded by someone 20 seconds from now who wasn't here to see this slide? Works every time. All right, now that we're all set, let's begin. Florin, show us some of the essential tips and tricks of GoLand.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so what you're seeing here is basically the IDE in action, because what kind of presentation about tips and tricks would it be without actually showing you the IDE, but rather some PowerPoint? So with that in mind, I created this repository just to serve as a tech demo for all the tips and tricks. It is available on GitHub, not necessarily in this current version. As you can see, there are some new additions here on the IDE side, especially in some areas like the database support, which we are just starting to populate and so on. So I would say to you, don't worry if you're missing any of these tips or you'd like to try them on your own. You'll get them through the GitHub repository too. We'll add a link in the description of this video for the GitHub repository at the end. And we're
going to do a blog post afterwards, right? And we'll put
that is correct.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Yeah, so see, asynchronous, we are live, definitely. But yeah, we'll definitely have a follow-up blog post too, where we'll add some of these links as well. And as I said, there are a bunch of places that we need to reach out, like completion, editing, navigation, refactoring, and so on. So there's quite a few areas of the IDE that you'll be able to download the repository, test it on your own. Cool. That being said, let's jump to one tip that you'll actually find in the README. The fact that you can customize your to-do list to make it your own, and not necessarily name it to-do, but as you'll see throughout the presentation, you can create your own and say something like example, or a step in the tip itself, or the shortcut for which I'm pressing. And you have a way to replicate my setup. And yeah, let's just jump in. First and foremost, one essential thing that you need to remember, if anything that's there to be remembered throughout the presentation, is that I will use Shift, which is our search everywhere. It works on Windows, Mac, and Linux as a shortcut. And this allows you to basically navigate around any actions in the IDE that we may have, any symbols from your source code, any files from your source code, any types from it, and even Git actions now in 2020.3. Not only that, you may also see from time to time when I'm performing actions, a small pop-up window down here, navigate search everywhere, for example. This will contain shortcuts in the future, I promise. It's just that this one doesn't need any shortcut. It's supposed to be a very well-known, let's say, shortcut for our users. And this will help you basically replicate what I'm typing or which keyboard interactions I have with the editor.
But that's a plugin. They in their own system won't see that pop up, right?
Exactly. To do that, you actually need to come here to settings or preferences if you're on Mac and search for our plugins. And when you go to plugins, as you can see, I have a bunch of them installed, one of them being Code With Me, our collaborative editing tool. They go for progress bar, which will distract you later on. Kubernetes, the macOS key map is there for me because I'm on Windows right now, and you wouldn't be able to see the Mac shortcuts otherwise. And a few others for Node.js and so on. And the presentation assistant plugin, which is the one that you'll see at the bottom. Also, you may have noticed that I have the Key Promoter X plugin. I'll get to that towards the end of the presentation. As a quick overview of this allows you to learn the shortcuts in the IDE at your own pace. So whenever you see me clicking on things, there may be a shortcut that's hidden behind them. But to make it not so distracting for us right now throughout the presentation, I'll hide that. Another thing that I like to do when both giving the presentations and actually working is to use our Zen Mode. And what Zen Mode does is that it hides all the IDE environments, all the tool windows, all the panels, and so on, and allows you and I to focus on the code itself. So the thing that's most important for us, be in the flow, stay in the flow, Zen Mode. And for those of you that may have not caught this as I typed it, Shift, and then Zen Mode. And you can also exit from the Zen Mode the same way you came in. So basically, Zen Mode again. Okay, now that these things are out of the way and our setup is complete, let's jump to the first tip. And you'll notice that while I have a certain order here, like completion, editing, and so on, I will actually jump around because I honestly won't have time to cover all of these. There are just simply too many. So let's jump to this one, language injections. This one is probably one of my favorite features, although it's hard to choose a favorite one. And let's see how this works. Let's say I have a JSON. I'm starting to type it like this, and then I'm like, oh no, I need to escape things. You'll say, Florin, you don't need to do that. If you simply replace the double quote with a row string, so with a backtick, you can start typing. So let's say field here, and maybe some value, right? But this is not enough. What if I would have a typo here and it's a long JSON and it's hard to figure out what's wrong in it, let's say. Well, press Alt-Enter, which is our show context action, and you'll get the two actions that we have available for this. And from here, you can use inject language. Now, you've seen me typing something here, and that is basically another tip that I want to share with you. Every time you see a list like this in the IDE, you can probably filter it by just starting to type something from it. So let's say I want to go quickly to inject. Okay, that is perfect. Exactly where I need it to be. Now, in this whole list, you'll see all the languages that the IDE recognizes out of the box or throughout language plugins or any other kind of plugins that you have installed. So for example, we are aware of the git ignore syntax or any kind of SQL. We are aware of Go itself. So if you want, you can inject Go into Go strings. That should be fun. Go templates, of course, and a bunch of others. But, you know, scrolling through this is only so much better. No, I don't think so. It's not much better than anything, really. Scrolling through such a list is boring. We know what we want. We want JSON, right? So we can start typing. Again, quickly filter out values, and you get to choose JSON or JSON5. Let's say we injected JSON here. Now, we actually get to see that we have an error. Why is that? Because when you inject a language into a field, into a string, you'll get automatically the IDE support. So, because GoLand is more than just a text editor, it's a fully fledged IDE, it can infer that, okay, now that you're editing JSON here, I can do my thing. I can run inspections, I can run completions, and so on and so forth. Now I can fix this. Not only that, but let's say this is like a really long string, right? Maybe I don't want to edit my JSON on one field. How do I do that? We can use the Alt-Enter again, and on any language injection that you apply to the editor, you'll have edit whatever name fragment. So in this case, edit JSON, but it could be edit SQL. And now you get another tab that's below, and you get full editor support in it too. So for example, if I were to place this one here and say reformat code, it automatically reformats what I have here. If I would use double quoted strings, it would also escape values for me automatically. So That's one awesome use of the injections in our IDE. You can close this at the end using the language, the Control F4, and that's it with the language injections. Now let's move to another. Tip. One tip is that you can hide that project tool window. So how do you jump back to it from here? Well, you can press the select in, the navigate, and then project view, right? And usually you can say file structure, local changes, and so on and so forth. So there are different places where you can quickly jump through it. But we are interested in the project view, which lands you here. And in the project view tool window, you can start typing something like tip 006. And we'll jump to the next one because that's the tip I want to show you today. You can also toggle this with Alt 1 or Option 1 on Mac, if I read my keys correctly. But yeah, don't worry. Let's focus on the next one. So let's say that I tell you, Florin, I want you to select just the field one from here. The natural motion, right or left hand on your mouse, come here, select something, right? But that might not be as efficient as simply using a shortcut for the extend selection. And you go and you extend your selection all the way to the top of the file, or you can shrink it. And this is not just a regular selection. It's actually a semantic selection. It knows how to understand, it basically understands your code, and it knows how to select chunks of code that are relevant. So in this case, you can see that I'm expanding from just the field to the method, to the identifier dot field, and then to the whole expression, the whole row, a block of code, the whole contents, and so on. Now, this is pretty cool if you really want to select quickly something. But did you know that if you go to the project tool window, you can extend the selection all the way through your project directory, and it will use the expanded list of folders to make the selection. As a bonus point, this works in other places too, like the database. So I won't show you that right now, but you should try it on your own. I think it's pretty cool to be able to select tables or columns in tables and so on based on the semantics that they have, rather than, having to drag the cursor on the screen. Okay, on to the next one. Again here. And our last editing tip that I want to share is the fact that completion works in comments. How does it happen? So let's say that we need to add here a comment, because when we navigated to the next error, it told us that we don't have a comment for this, and methods or any kind of symbols that are exported in Go should have a comment per GoLand and so on. So first and foremost, let's add Alt-Enter, or we can click on the quick link there and say add a comment. Now we can start typing something like this, and maybe reference fmt print line package, right? Or let's not reference that. Let's say that we need something like this for demo, and then, oh, okay, I have the demo type in completion. So now completion working into documentation makes it easy for you to write that documentation, right? You'll write it, right? Okay, you will be able to also jump between documentation and different identifiers. In this case, we jump between these two. And that's about the last tip that I want to show from editing. Let's go to completion. Another way to navigate all the way back to the completion folder and so on without having to bring the project tool window is to use the navigation bar. How do you do that? Well, in Zen mode, or in any other modes actually, you just have to invoke the shortcuts. And please let me know if the tip for the shortcut keys disappears too fast. I'll try to invoke it twice when possible, just so that we can keep up with it. But basically from here, we get to navigate back and forth, let's say, the list of directory structure. We can select an item and then we can navigate back and forth with it expanded. And again, we can use quick typing around values so that we select whatever we need to go to. So in this case, let's go to tip number 10. And here, you'll see our completion tip related to one of my other favorite features. As I said, hard to distinguish between which one is the favorite one. This one is related to how we type dates and how we interact with dates and times in Go. And as you know, the standard format looks something like 2006 for the year. You'll see that we are now using a special color for this, which you can also customize. But maybe that's all you remember from how to type the YYMMDD format, right? Not anymore, because if you're using the latest IDE version, what you can do is you can say month, like this. And lo and behold, the IDE can actually complete it as such. If you invoke basic completion further here, you'll also notice that we have a bunch of other identifiers in the list that you can use. And you can even type something like day. And from the day, you'll get to see a bunch of identifiers that Go supports. So hopefully now writing a formatting value for your time or date will look a lot easier and simpler to do. Actually, let me finish with this one. Let's say something like, I don't know, this one. Of course, this works not only for the format function, but it also works in the parse function. Let's say, well, if I would learn how to type year, 4-digit or 2-digit version, month, January, and let's say day, like this. And it works seamlessly here too. Another completion tip that I have to share with you is the completion tip number 3. And this one is related to postfix completions. How does it work? So a postfix completion is a way to wrap your code after you type it with some templated code. For example, let's say that we now understand that send message returns a value, right? Actually returns 2 values, returns a integer and an error. Knowing that, we can start typing .var. And the IDE will generate some additional variables for us. In this case, it's going to be message and error. We can ignore this one for now, at least for demo purposes, and leave the error here. The cool thing about postfix completions is that they return the cursor where it was. And yeah, I mean, I'm back here. Now I can do error dot and say not nil. And that's a quick way to handle errors in Go. Also error dot panic will get you here. So hopefully error handling becomes easier now. And one last tip from here, it's tip number 2, the smart type completion. Let's jump quickly to where we should invoke completion here. And if we do that, you'll see that the IDE tries its best to prioritize what it thinks you may need, but also there's a bunch of other things that may not be needed, like, for example, the HTTP package here. So how do we quickly filter that list to only what's relevant for us? Well, Postfix Completion does that. You press the shortcut for it, and you'll see a narrowed down list of possible identifiers that you can place there. In this case, it's also showing something from the HTTP package, because in there is something that can be used, either the not found function or the type itself for the handler func, but also a closure, which we've seen earlier. And when you type that, or select that, you'll get the quick prototype for the closure function, and then you just need to rename the parameters, for example. So this works not only in such cases, but in a lot of other cases too. And it's one thing that we're happy to say that it works across all the languages. So it doesn't work only in Go, it works in JavaScript, TypeScript, and so on and so forth if you're doing those from GoLand or any of our other IDEs. Okay, let's go to the run and debug features for a bit, because I think that's one area that I like the most when it comes to our IDE, and I'll show you why in a second. Let's first generate some tests, because that's how maybe most of you are detecting bugs, right? You write a test and you see that it has a failure. Now, how do we generate a test in GoLand? Well, we select an identifier like this, and we say generate. You'll see a bunch of options in the menu, but we can select the test for function. We can also select test for file or the whole package. It's up to you what you need to test. For function should be enough here. And now GoLand generated the test for us. It also added the correct naming and so on. It's using the table testing approach to generate all of this. And all that's left for us is to add some test cases. So let's do so. You may notice that it already added the comma back here. We can say fill all the fields for me. So Alt-Enter on that. And, well, let's actually give it a name first. And here, because I didn't select to do it recursively, I need to fill all the fields manually. Let's say value 1, and I want probably 3. Let's add quickly another one. So if I would say fill all the fields here, let's type second. Here, I think that value is good. Field 1. I want value 1. And I want 2. Yeah. You may notice that one new thing that we have in GoLand is the ability to run a subtest. So, for example, I can run the whole test or just a subtest from here. So let's run this, and let's run it with coverage, because we can run tests with coverage in GoLand. And this is the cute gopher progress bar I was mentioning. It's here to distract you. And we have a test failure. Okay, let's see what's happening. So we know that we have 100% of the files, 67% of the statements, and if we go here on the coverage line, we get to see that this is covered. Okay, the main function is not covered, but that is fine. Yet our test failed somehow. So if we quickly navigate to the test itself, in this case this subtest, it tells us that add to field equals 2, but we want 3. Well, obviously 1 plus 1 cannot be equal to 3, at least in the math I know. Or apparently this CPU knows. So let's click on this wheel here and say set autotest delay to 1 second. And let's see what autotest means. Well, autotest is a toggle that we have here. So again, enable the delay through the cogwheel here, set auto test delay, 1 second. And we do toggle auto test. Now, let's fix our code. And without me having to touch anything, tests are running again with coverage. And that's one of the cool things that you can do. If you do TDD, hopefully, this should be of help for you. You can also hide the past tests so that you don't have to worry about them. Basically, if they are folded, they worked.
Can I make a point about this real quick, Florin?
Oh, yeah, sure.
First,
Anytime.
I love this stuff. Oh, just do the entire webinar on the test runner. Can you bring back up the test window with the coverage?
Sure. Let's quickly run just this one with coverage.
Yep. For those of you watching this, a little reminder: the window you see on the right and the window you see at the bottom are standard JetBrains IDE windows. So if you're doing Go with JavaScript in GoLand, which has support for the front end and the back end, and you wind up doing testing in JavaScript and test coverage in JavaScript, it'll be totally familiar to you because it looks exactly like this and behaves exactly like this.
Oh, yeah. That is true. And you can do a lot more. So I just did a test for a single specific thing, but you can test, run the test suite for the whole Go package, for example, or you can even, I haven't tried it actually, but I probably should run a compound configuration to test this and merge the coverage results from JavaScript and Go. That should be an interesting one to check out. So,
anyway, sorry for interrupting. This was on the screen, and I wanted people to see while it was there.
Yeah, so hint for the amateurs that want to try something new and are like, yeah, let's tweak about, something. Go create a compound configuration, run it with coverage, and tell us how that works. Or if it doesn't. Okay. Yeah, I said there's a bunch of things, but I also know that there's a bunch of others that I want to show you. So I'll try to speed up a bit on this one. Let me show you a tip that's related to the debugger itself. So let's say that we select a breakpoint here, right? And we put a breakpoint on this line because it has a couple of chained calls. When you do debugging and you usually want to avoid, let's say, the make demo and you're jumping just into greet, it's not really possible if you say, I want to step into, because step into will first go in make demo. That's the first function that's evaluated, right? Let's say you know that for sure that make demo works okay. If you press the smart step into shortcut, then what you will see is that we get a different color item for make demo, or if you press up or down arrows, you'll be able to select where you want to step into. So do you want to step into make demo, or you want to step into greet, which would be the second function? Let's say we step into greet. Now, another cool thing is that we just avoided that. And in the process, we are noticing another feature of the IDE. You probably noticed that myType says myType is initialized here, right? For the variable D that we have for the receiver. Why is that? Our code contains a DebugString method, or it can be a string method or an error method. Depends on your needs, but generally, if you have a simple enough, that means a method that can be evaluated by the IDE itself without any help from Delve or Go, then this will show you that value alongside for types. It's especially useful if you have a large type that you want to summarize in a few strings, or you need to do some let's say computation on that, but again, very simple computation like math for adding values. And then you get to understand what's happening in your code with your type a lot quicker without having to resort to any evaluation or anything like that. So that's another way the IDE helps you during debugging. Something you don't get to see while print line debugging, I guess. Let's jump to the next one. Speaking of print line debugging, not that I think it's a bad thing, but yeah. Anyway, this one says run the code below. Well, I need to set up a breakpoint first. How do I do that? Let me invoke the fake go part here, or should I just? Let's actually not set up the breakpoint. This will take more time. So let's run this in debugger. Right? There's no breakpoint. I decided not to put a breakpoint, deviating from the script. You'll see a bunch of messages here, and here the debugger is running, right? But there's nothing to show here. Why is that? What I want to show you is the dump goroutines feature. If you click on this icon here, what happens is that the IDE tells Delph to stop a bit the process, take a snapshot of all running goroutines, give it back to them to the IDE, and then resume the execution. And all of that happens fairly quick. And you can do that several times. As you can see, different timestamps here and so on. Let's stop the process in the background and look at what the feature does. So you'll see here that we have a message, 78 goroutines, 19 stacks are unique. That means that we have 78 running goroutines in our application, but only 19 have a unique stack. A stack being a list of, well, function calls that are made alongside the execution of that particular goroutine. We also have a couple of stacks here for time slip, which are different from this one. This one shows the handler func on the home handler executing. This one shows the handler func on products. And we can hide what we don't need. So we know that there are 2 goroutines like this and 2 like this, but we are not interested in this one. For example, from login. We can hide the goroutine, or we can hide all the goroutines with the same stack. So there they are hidden. They are hidden away at the bottom where you can find the list expanded if you want. You can also expand the list here. By default, it's merged, but you can say, okay, I want you to expand this one. Not only that, but you can start filtering. So for example, if I want to say a login, well, unfortunately, I only have a login that's hidden away. Let's say products. So one of the goroutines that's not hidden is in product handler here. So you can quickly browse for functions in your code or in third-party code like that in the goroutine dumps. This is extremely useful to help you through debugging a, let's say, goroutine leak, for example, or if you think that, there's something happening in your application that shouldn't happen and it's involving goroutines. Okay. One other thing that I want to show you before perhaps taking some questions from the audience. So the last tip that I have for you here is the ability to generate benchmarks. So how does that work? We can go here, well, actually, to the main test file. And after we generate the benchmarks, right, we need to run them. So let's run this with the CPU profiler. And you can see here already that there's a list of other profilers available, like the memory profiler and blocking profiler, mutex profiler. What it means is that the IDE connects to pprof. Pprof in turn supports those profiling types. When it finishes running, we see a flame graph. Now, flame graphs are not my favorite. I prefer cold trees. For me, they make a lot more sense. And you can go and expand them, collapse them, and so on and so forth, focus on them. Or you can go to the method list and just have a look at, okay, what's using my CPU time or my memory and so on and so forth. So If performance is something that you're looking after, this is the feature that you want to use. And I think with that said, Paul, do we have any questions from the audience maybe that we need to answer?
Sure. First, I'll abuse host privilege and talk about some of the things that you just showed. Shift as the entry to the universe, and Alt Enter as kind of the portal into all of our magic. It was cool to see you lead with those. I'm glad you showed navigation bar pop-up thing. That's like my thing that I do a million times a day. And I got to admit, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I got to admit, I learned like 10 things. So good job so far. We asked out on Twitter, and we got a response from Frank Meyer about one of his favorite tips in GoLand. And he's talking about a custom live template, which is already cool. You talked about live templates, but a custom live template based on the existing error live template, but with different formatting. Any chance you can show that?
Sure. So let's actually create a new Scratch file. So we can say new, and here we get a menu. Let's say go to the Scratch file type, and here we create a Go file. So another free tip if you want. Scratch files allows you to quickly type things out in them and so on. And let's explore the live template that Frank mentioned to us. So what are live templates? If you search here for live template, you will see that we have an editor live templates section. In here, you can see a bunch of templates that you can use and customize. For example, we have a template for, let's say, for the for loop. And Frank's proposal was that, hey, look, instead of having just templates for all of these, you have a template for the error template, right? But I use it in a custom way. So you can either duplicate or you can create your own using the add part. Let's type the abbreviation Frank uses. So error F. If error with formatting. So what I typed here is the abbreviation, or what will show in the completion list, and a bit of description for it so we can identify it easier. And here we can say something like the return fmt.err f, and then maybe we have say something to type in, and our error value. Also, if I remember correctly, that was what Frank was using for the template itself. A few things to explain. The error itself refers to the variable that holds the error type, so it's not necessarily error as usual in Go. End means the position where your cursor ends up after you're using the template. And you can edit variables by clicking on Edit Variable. Now, if you don't know what all of these are, click on the question mark here, a browser window will show up, and you'll get a full documentation on this. And on that note, I want to thank you, the documentation team, for making an awesome job at documenting our IDEs. They are lovely. Okay, you also need to apply a context, and in this case, it's a Go context with a statement type. So if you go here, you'll see all of that and how it expands. We've seen earlier something similar with the postfix completions. Postfix completions are similar to this. Postfix completions apply at the end of an identifier. This one applies at the beginning. So let's say var error, and then we have error f, and we see that from our list. We see our description from here. the error type, and now everything is here. The IDE automatically imported the FNT package for us, and so on and so forth. So we can write our message here.
All right,
Okay.
This is so insanely productive, and we could do an entire webinar just on the live template postfix. There are so many little knobs on there that have so much depth under them. All of the features in our product just have like a decade of depth under them that can really affect productivity. I know we only have like 15 minutes left. Maybe we'll go a little bit over, but we'll go through a couple more that have come in through the comments, Florin, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. Lucas has one, and on these, go through them really quickly because there's a number of them, and we got to get you back to what you were showing. Lucas has a question about what I really appreciated recently is inspection for custom build tags. GoLand will show you if your code is under custom build tag won't be available for your current build settings. Any chance you can show that?
Oh yeah. So yeah, it's been a while since I used those.
I ask you is one that you can actually show.
So it's plus build and then something, right? So you already see that it's colored with an underline, and it says build must appear before the package. And that's one of the things that I found hard to start with, because it's like, oh, I always put it here or after the import and so on and so forth. But actually the correct place would be before the package. Now, when that happens and things are in the correct order, you'll now notice that this does not apply to the current build system. And that's because we are telling the Go command to expect, like the editor, that this is available only for the something tag in the Go build section, but we are not telling the editor to use that. So we can use the edit Go project settings and use the custom tags here. So we can say something, well, something. And now the warning is gone. If you want to use that inside your run configuration, there's also a checkbox that you need to enable. I'll show you that in a later tip, maybe.
Okay. You okay with going to the next one?
Yeah, sure. I'm just resetting my environment meanwhile.
Sure. And I don't know if you're going to get to this today. Are you going to have enough time to get to the SQL, the Mongo SQL language injection stuff?
Sure, we can jump right to it after that.
Good. Jump right to it, because you're going to blow his mind. And I'm going to, when you jump to it, I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that he wanted shown. Okay, and then Steve had a question which might be a little bit more of a support request, so feel free to answer this by saying how to reach out to us. A compatible shell that isn't really slow on Windows 10. So the fact that he's having issues with how slow it is means that we need to take a look and see what's going on.
Yeah, we probably need to take a look on that one. And honestly, I'm not sure if I can respond to that particular query right now. Sorry. Sure. What I can tell you is go to help, contact support, submit the bug request report, submit feedback. Probably one of the first two, contact support or submit the bug report.
Good.
And also go to this one, collect logs and diagnostics data. And please attach that so that our engineers can actually have a look at some of the logs in there. You can search them before, just to make sure you're not sharing any personal data or anything that you may not want to share with us, because by default we don't collect telemetry or anything like that. So it's hard for us to, we don't know what's happening without.
We'll go quickly through the next one because it might be more aimed at me. Steve also asked about my comment about web front ends and testing. And I pointed him at the React tutorial that's in WebStorm, but WebStorm's bundled in GoLand. If there is something unique to GoLand or Go projects and JavaScript front ends, he suggested, Florin, that you and I might want to do a blog post showing about doing front end testing in GoLand.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, on to two other ones. Let's see if we can get to them quickly. At 10:40. All right. How to see threads while debugging.
So basically I need to go back.
All right.
Okay, no worries. If you remember, let's go to tip number 5 here quickly. Oh, well, that might not actually be a good one. Let me think. Tip number 6, where we dump goroutines here. So let's start this with a debugger and place a breakpoint here. And when you have the breakpoint set and so on, you can see the goroutines. So I hope that's the question. If you really need to see threads, which would be useful, I guess, I don't know, there's a show threads button. And that switches from the threads view, from the goroutine view to the threads view. Now, by default, we are showing goroutines. That's the Go usual request, let's say. But that's how you see it. You see them under debugger goroutines. If you need threads, click on this button.
Okay. Last one, then we'll get you back over there. Steve also asks, find in files. What happens if you search for text in a file and the first 1 or 2 or 3 characters like matches everything in the universe and hangs? Do you have any tips for that? My 2 answers would be you can click the box to narrow the search. You can narrow it by scope. You can narrow it by file pattern matching. But maybe the bigger one is, and Florin, I'd be curious if you agree with this. I try to teach people to stop thinking about files, stop thinking about strings, think about symbols.
Exactly.
And
so
do a
let's say
lookup for symbols.
Exactly. So let's say, well, you can search with search everywhere here for just about everything. Let's say I'm selecting this one and it's going to search for make request. Now, obviously, this is relatively a small project, so it's going to be instant. You have a dedicated shortcut. I don't know if you can see it really well, so I'll try to run it. So let's say I'm selecting this identifier. Let me hide this a bit so you can see it properly. And well, when you search for symbols, it actually knows how to search only for the things that you really need. So for symbol definitions, not anything else. If you need types, go to the type search here. So this will ensure that hopefully not the universe will match on this one, especially useful if you're developing on Node and stuff.
Can you bring up the find files dialog real quick, and we'll just show that and then get back to your stuff. Okay, so the file
find
mask
files
at the top.
Yes, so this one,
first line of defense. But the other is in project module, directory scope, etc. That's you can define your own scopes, but that's also a good way to narrow where you're going to look into something manageable.
Oh yeah, and then you also have the filter pop-up here. So if you click on this one, you can also say exclude comments or string literals.
Probably the source of the problem is the comments.
Yeah, I don't know. Still, if that's too slow, again, contact support. We'd love to have a look at it. Normally should be fairly quick. But it depends on the size of the project. And so
I do Python, the slow language, and it's fast for me. So I said Go and GoLand would be pretty fast. If not, it's something we should look at. Back to you, Florin, for resuming with your tips.
Oh yeah, so let's jump into the database one. Since I said we'll jump to that one. Normally I would start this in a Docker database, but I kind of cheated a bit this time around just to make sure that, things work. And I started the database already in a Docker container. By the way, we do have support for Docker inside of our IDE and for Kubernetes. So if you're dabbling with those, check it out. And I connected to a database from here. I won't show you the whole process. You also get update notifications for driver versions and so on and so forth. We support a bunch of them. We also automatically inject SQL into SQL query strings from Go if we detect that this is actually SQL query that's going to be used in one of the libraries supported.
That's the nature of the
so,
question. But just to get it set up correctly, this is MongoDB running in Docker.
Exactly. This is MongoDB running in Docker, and I'm going to do something that's really, really fun. I'm going to create a database called the JetBrains one. I am going to create a collection called the IDs. So as you can see, you can, I already have all the things typed in and so on, but the ID is smart enough to offer you completion for all of these. Thanks to our colleagues in DataGrip, they do an awesome job on this one. And now I've inserted something into the database. So you can see all the things that are done here. You can double click on this one, for example, and you get a list of values that are in the database. You can edit them, synchronize it with the database, and so on. You can extract the data using SQL queries and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that you can do here. Too many. Probably we should do a separate webinar. Yeah. So let's go back to our console here. I don't want to drop this one. One thing that you can probably want to do if you're more familiar with SQL than with the lovely format for MongoDB is that, again, code completion here. I'm going to ignore that part. But you can run SQL queries against MongoDB, so you can do something like select, and bam, we have the results. Go ahead, Paul. I think there were some questions. So I don't think I have a tip for that right now, but basically, if you would go somewhere, let's say, let's go into here, into the date example, and if I would say SQL open something, variable. So see how quickly I can write a
that's pretty
database
fast
here. Yeah, so if you really need to code fast, not for a presentation, you can do query. And when you, let's say we do database query, right? If I start typing here, select, I don't need to tell the ID to inject anything. It automatically injected things. And not only that, but I can say, okay, what do I want to use? ID dot name, right? I don't know how this works from SQL. In this case, probably is JetBrains from MongoDB. JetBrains dot IDs dot name from JetBrains dot IDs, and let's make things a bit more visible here. That's how, that's the automatic SQL injection that we have. It works for the standard library and a few other libraries that are popular in the Go ecosystem.
For this question, let's unpack the awesomeness of what was just shown. You had a string in the middle of Go code.
Yes.
You started typing something that looked like SQL, and it knew to change that string and language inject SQL, just like you previously showed language inject of JSON. Yes. And then it started autocomplete. It started syntax highlighting and colorizing the grammar of SQL and autocompleting the grammar of SQL. But then it started autocompleting based on the database that's configured for this project, right?
Correct. So you can have multiple databases configured as well. And yeah, basically that's exactly what happens. And not only that, if you press Alt-Enter, again, edit Mongo fragment, you can also run queries straight from here.
Okay, there you go. That was another thing I promised him that we would talk about. In the middle of your Go code, you can execute a query. These things are symbols, so you can do things with them like refactor, right? You can change a column name.
Oh yeah, or you can say jump to.
Either side, you can sit in your Go code and refactor this.
Sure. So let's see. I have modified table here from refactor this. I have to admit I've never tried it with the how do you call it, with the MongoDB support, but let's say we do modified column.
No need to do it in the middle of the webinar.
Okay.
You showed the pop-up and that was enough. And kind of the point is, before I was making the comment for Steve's question about search and to think in terms of symbols, this pile of SQL in the middle of your Go code is symbols, not a string. Think of it as symbols, and all those things that you would do with symbols like autocomplete, refactor, etc., navigate, you can do with SQL as well as Go code.
Yeah, so when we said about the symbols, I typed IDs in the symbols and it found just the database because it knows that that's the place that it defines the database, it defines the symbol. You can also navigate to the collection itself from here to the database, and I can see that. So yeah, you can do a lot of shortcuts, productivity hacks.
So at the very beginning, you talked about shift, search everywhere as the master entry point into the universe. And you mentioned that we added support for searching Git commits, but that's also true for SQL stuff, right? Search everywhere gets you into your configured database.
Exactly. So if you configure your IDE, if a database, then you can do that. I don't remember, let's say, I don't have anything under Git right now that probably worth searching for. Let's say 2020.3, right? So something like that. Oh, we do math, by the way, in search everywhere, if you really need that. So I'm not going to show that part right now, but yeah, basically you can search for a bunch of other things, like you can search for the Git branch, references, and so on and so forth, to quickly jump around.
All right, that more than covers what he was asking. He asked for this, and I was like, oh no, we're going to show you this.
Oh, Paul, I think we both know that we can probably spend days talking about the IDs and their features without breaking. So,
and you're better with the data grip stuff than I am. I just think it's magic. Like, I've got a local SQLite table and a remote Postgres table, and I can drag a table from SQLite to Postgres, and it will create the table and copy all the data. How do you do that?
There's so much magic happening. One thing, by the way, speaking of magic things, I like the new support for Mermaid to draw diagrams here, because what you need to basically do is,
because this is so sexy.
Oh yeah, I like that one. Close that one. Oh no, I'm gonna show you how to do refactorings. That's one thing that you should definitely use in the IDEs. This is just cool because you can draw diagrams in your Markdown and have them previewed and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's close with like something that's,
that Mermaid thing on my personal project this weekend.
Oh yeah, it's cool, right?
It's really mature stuff. They cover a lot of cases.
Cool. So let's do 2 tips from here, and then we maybe take some other questions and close this one out. So we are gophers. We implement interfaces. We love interfaces. Hopefully not too much. But how do we generate them? How do we implement a type, right? So what you need to do is use the generate feature here. Say implement methods. We don't have any types in the current file to choose from, so we probably want to create one. Let's say create a type for us, and I like the read-write closer interface, which, by the way, identifiers, you can type them like this, and they'll be filtered out quickly in the completion pop-up here and in other places too, so check it out. And once you type that, the magic happens. And bam, now I'm implementing the interface. And not only that, I can know that I'm implementing the interface because I'll have some markers here on the side, which will tell me, hey, all the places that are implementing this interface or maybe have any relation, all the types, the demo type implements reader interface, writer interface, closer interface, and so on. which we can see here. If you wonder how I have these in Zen Mode, right click on an empty part from here and then configure gutter icons, and you have to enable them. So Zen Mode by default doesn't have them, but I find them still useful. And the other tip related to interfaces is, again, we said something about, having interfaces. Let's say we have a couple of types that maybe we realize that the method one is common to them. So we select one of the types. We do the refactor this, which is, I guess, the first shortcut that I would like you to remember. Refactor this is pretty awesome, because if you forget any other refactoring shortcuts, this is the one to use. And we can say extract interface. And now we get to name our interface. We say method one, this one, okay. In what file? Well, in this file, because we can keep it in the current file, in the current package, and so on and so forth. Refactor, and bam, I have extracted an interface from an existing type. And I guess that's our last tip for today. We have a bunch of others which we haven't covered, like type hierarchy, call hierarchy support, change signature refactoring, move refactoring, and so on and so forth. But I guess
I forgot to ask you. Actually, let me do the last question from the audience.
Yeah.
Before I get to some questions I wanted to ask you. Let's see. We have a question from. We have a question about customizing screens from Jimmy Wayan. How do you customize the look of the window decoration? I'm not sure if this question is about the ID as a whole or one particular window.
Window decoration. I'm not really sure what particular part that means. Like, there's a bunch of themes that are available through plugins section. So if you go here, well, if I spell plugins correctly, the IDE can't defend me against that one. You can search for a theme and you'll see like a bunch of sure. them. That's the question, but not really sure.
There's even some really minor, I don't say minor, specific things like in Data Grip, you can customize your table color from one query to another so that you don't accidentally delete everything from production.
Oh,
so there are lots
yes,
of different knobs in lots of different places.
Yeah, so let me quickly go to this one. So when you select your connection, you can say, well, I want this to be like a rose. And then everything here will be rose. And
so Jimmy, including this one. I encourage you to come to the next webinar that we do on this, part 1 of Infinity, and submit us via Twitter some questions in advance that you would like Florin to show about customizing look and feel. Florin, a couple of things before we get out of here. I forgot to ask you, what's the Go version you're using in this project?
Oh, right. So Go versions. How do I see that quickly? Well, how do I see quickly? It would be to go here and 1.15.8.
Wait, I thought 1.16 was released yesterday. You're using an old version now?
Yeah, you caught me. Okay, let me download this one really quick. All from the IDE, because I'm happy to say that we support that. And you now see the Go for downloading the IDE version in real time. While it happens, so this will download, unzip, verify, unpack, and index, and so on. You don't actually have to wait until the next webinar. If you do have questions, we are available on Twitter, Gophers Slack in the GoLand room, on our tracker on NewTrack. So reach out to us and we are happy to help you out. And again, if you have any other questions, quickest way to get in touch, help, contact support, and the guys are awesome, the girls as well. Everyone working there, super happy to help you out.
And Florin spends more time than he should in the Slack channel, so you probably can both get some help from Florin and give him some ideas for future webinars. One more point, Florin. We are in EAP right now, Early Access Program. How can people more easily get new versions of GoLand, including the EAPs.
Right, so you now see actually that Go 116 was installed, and well, I did the indexing part, which we upload. But no, seriously, it's really quick to do.
Yep.
And now if I'm looking here, Go 116 is being used in my project. So if you want to quickly test out your project with a new Go version or a different Go version, go into the drop-down list here.
That's
or
a really easy
download.
way to get a
so
new
it's
Go
all
version.
available from settings. Oh yeah, I really like this one. And as you can see, it works with mainline versions too, so like the master and so on. So back on track to your question, let me exit the Zen mode from here and minimize the IDE for a bit. So we have this little thing called the JetBrains Toolbox, which I am so sorry for the scaling on this one. I will try to center it on the window here. The Toolbox app is free. You can download it even if you only have one of our IDEs or you're using like the IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition or Android Studio. But this one allows you to run multiple IDE versions. You can see I have 2020.3 development version because I have access to that one. 2020.3.2 that updates to early releases, and 2021.1 nightly. So the nightly version is available throughout the EAP period, which is our early access program. The early access programs welcomes you to test out our IDEs before they're released as stable. And if you scroll down at the bottom, usually you'll see the installed IDEs. You can even install different IDE versions, like the 21.1 nightly, the EAP version, and so on and so forth. So we highly encourage you to use the toolbox. It also has some project management built in, which I'm not going to share because I don't want to leak something that I shouldn't. But you get to install multiple IDEs at the same time and use whatever you want. So for example, while I'm still running 2020.3.2, I'm starting the nightly for 2021.1, which, by the way, will bring the Go embed support for you. Paul, this is the last thing that I want to show to people, something that I'm really happy to share with people.
Fresh out of the oven.
Yeah, so like you can actually see I'm running two IDE versions at the same time. So I'm showing the 2020.3 and 2021.9 build. So fresh of the oven. If you're using Go 116, and I'm using the release candidate here, you may have heard that Go embed syntax is available now. And what I want to show to you right now is the support for it. Given it's a live demo, well, we have to wait for a second for everything to come into place. But once that happens, we highlight this one. And we can even give you completion here. So for example, if you want to type index.html here, you get completion. Public? Sure, we can do public. We can do public and go deep. Or we can do source and anything like that. And I'm not going to cover all the other aspects for it. So if you're using Go 116, if you want to take good care of your code and see the Go embed syntax, highlight completion and any possible issues with that, check it out. It's in the blog that we have on blog.jetbrains.com/go. And with that note, thank you, Paul. You have the mic.
All right. Back over to my screen to get us out of here. Florin, the whole time when you're like, do half a keystroke and 50 pages of Go code appears, I'm thinking of like, hey Siri, but instead, hey GoLand, could you write my program for me? These tips and tricks, once people spend a little bit of time learning their tool, the little bit of time spent turns into these huge productivity gains, and your mind gets to focus on the problem rather than the syntax, and you get to stay in the flow. So thanks for taking the time to give us a speed tour of part 1 of infinity of GoLand tips and tricks. Thank you to the audience. Lots of good questions, lots of good engagement. If any of you have any questions later, please feel free to reach out to us, to the GoLand team by email or social media. If you'd like to get more information on GoLand, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/go. Easy to remember. We'd love your feedback on this webinar, including the question I asked near the end. Any suggestions on this format? Do you want us to take more questions from the audience or focus more of the time on Florin going through the material that he's created, or any other ideas for this webinar format? Let us know on Twitter or fill in the after webinar survey. We look at the survey, and the recording will be made available on the YouTube channel basically immediately. If you haven't already, please check out the GoLand blog, where you can find up-to-date news about releases and events. Busy time of year right now. Now's a good time to be taking a look at the GoLand blog, as well as educational resources that we put out there. So, for example, the recording of this webinar, Florin, you or someone else on the team will do a blog post linking to the recording, providing material, I believe, about the repository and stuff like that. And we'll provide any other information that we have for this webinar on the blog and on the tweet that goes with it. That's all from us today. Florin, thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, and everyone being here. And as a last tip, did you know that in the latest version of the 2021.1 EAP, we have support for remote targeting of Docker, WSL2, so Windows Subsystem for Linux, and SSH building or running for your projects? Check it out on our blog.
That's really cool news, and you just couldn't stop yourself, could you? Good job on all the tips today. We'll do this again. Thanks everyone for joining us, and hope you have a nice day.